What's up, everyone? Kevin Allen here, aka the Geek from DFS Army, and I am about 45 best ball drafts into my 2024 best ball drafting season. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about some players that I'm just avoiding in best ball drafts completely and probably should be avoided at current ADP in your season long and best ball drafts as well. So let's jump right into it. I've got DraftKings ADPs loaded up on screen here. I'm going to talk about the first player that I am looking to avoid in 2024, and that is Nico Collins, wide receiver, Houston Texans. Now, you might be thinking Nico Collins is the man. He had a great year last year, blah, blah, blah. And that's all true, right? Love Nico last year. But number one, was he all that different from Tank Dell? Not really. Dell got hurt, but when they were both playing, they were both producing similarly in 2024 and in 2023. And a lot of it was just kind of luck of the draw. But the big issue for me this year is the addition of Stefon Diggs. With Stefon Diggs in the mix, you now have to split those targets up between three wide receivers, three dominating wide receivers that will demand the football. So I just don't think there's enough volume to go around to support Nico Collins going in the top 8, top 20 picks in fantasy drafts, especially when you could just get Tank Dell 30, 40 picks later, or even Stefon Diggs at this point, 15. Not that I'm drafting him either. I think all three of those guys have the same issue. But if I did need exposure or want exposure to this Texans passing offense, let's say I have Stroud, I want to stack him with someone. At this point, I'd rather go with Diggs, who's going, let's see, Nico Collins going around pick 17, and you've got Stefon Diggs all the way down to 33. So you can get Diggs about a round and a half later. No big deal. You're getting about the same benefits. Now, in that spot where Collins is going, early part of round 2, I'd much rather take Jonathan Taylor, Drake London, Devontae Adams, HN, pretty much all the players that go around him. Mike Evans is in that mix. Pretty much all those players. Derrick Henry, of course. I value all of those players well above Nico Collins, so he is a sketchy pick. I'm fully avoiding him in 2024. Just on a similar note, in this part of the draft, I'm also mostly avoiding Puka Nacua, not because I don't think Puka is a great player or solid or can return solid returns. I really like Puka Nacua, but I just don't think he's any different than Cooper Kupp, who is available, 2 rounds later. So I'm just going to take Cooper Kupp instead of Puka Nacua. You can get him in round 3. Puka, you need him at the top of round 1. I'm not wasting my first round pick on a guy that I can get a match of him 2 rounds later. It just doesn't make sense to me. It's not the way that I like to draft my team. So avoiding Puka Nacua as well. This next player is a rough avoid for me. I do love the player, and that's Chris Olave, wide receiver, New Orleans Saints. Man, Olave's going currently in the middle of round 2, and I really like Olave as a player, but here's my issue with him. He just has not been scoring enough touchdowns to pay off on where he's being drafted currently. In the middle of round 2, I need a guy who's producing better than 15.4 fantasy points per game. He's only getting 5 touchdowns last season, and that's been the thing with him. He hasn't scored a ton of touchdowns. Now, last year was a full year with Derek Carr, and the offense really hasn't changed in New Orleans at all. Expecting more of the same. The issue for me with Olave, if you look at his season last year, was the double-digit target games were not as frequent as you'd like. There's way too many 5, 6, and 8 target games in this mix. He does get a lot of yardage, and he's a great player, and he's going to produce. He's fairly consistent with his scoring, but he's more of a guy exactly that averages 15.4 fantasy points per game, so a mid-teens type of producer rather than a monster scores guy. And, if you just pull up other names in this area, like I fully expect Derrick Henry, Kyron Williams put up almost 22 points per game last year. You're getting him picks later. Brandon Ayuk, 16 points per game last year, so put up more points per game. Evans, 17.4. All these guys produced better than Olave in 2023. And there are some other names that have the potential to rise up and outproduce him as well. So he's just not an exciting player for me. Not exciting enough to be my round 2 pick. I'd rather get Adams, or if that kind of misses, usually what I do in round 2 is avoid those wide receivers and jump over to running backs where both Henry, Williams, and HN are all running backs that could potentially lead your team to fantasy glory. So I don't think Olave is the kind of player that's going to help your team win a championship. He's not going to hurt you, but I don't think he's that player that's going to elevate you. And I'm looking for players to elevate me in the first couple of rounds of the draft. All right, my third wide receiver and third player that I'm avoiding heavily at current ADP in 2024 best ball drafts is Packers wide receiver Jayden Reed. This one's a big one for me. Jayden Reed had a pretty good year last year. I get it. But, there were some factors in play. Averaging 12.7 fantasy points per game. Fine. Great. Here's the thing, though. He was hyper efficient, putting up 10 touchdowns last year. Can he repeat that? I'm not so sure. The yardage total wasn't anything special. Receptions, 68 receptions, 828 yards. If you pull out the 10 touchdowns and just kind of look at his production, it's very mediocre, particularly for his current ADP, which is 60th overall. So right up there at the end of round 4 or the beginning of round 5. I don't agree. Jayden Reed has some of the same issues that Nico Collins has, but even worse in the sense that Jayden Reed is not the clear-cut number 1 wide receiver for his own team. That's not even who he is. this. It could be Romeo Doubs. It could be Christian Watson. Both of those guys potentially could start ahead of Jaden Reed and play more snaps per game than Jaden Reed. Not to mention Dontavian Wicks is on that team, and he's also competing for touches. So way too crowded of a wide receiver room in Green Bay. Now, things can change. Let's say if Christian Watson gets another, hamstring hampered season going and Jaden Reed kind of gets thrust into a more voluminous role, great, right? Maybe he will. But I think at his current ADP, you're paying at ADP at rank 60, ADP 67 overall, you're paying as if that already happened. You're paying for a player as if Christian Watson is hurt all year and won't take the snaps, as if Dontavian Wicks won't have any elevation. I don't agree with that. I think it's way too risky. I don't really see the upside in a Jaden Reed pick here. There's so many solid players in this zone that you could pick up that will probably produce as much or as well or better than him. Calvin Ridley's there. Chris Godwin is fine. Keon Coleman has that big upside, that rookie upside. And of course, my favorite, Ladd McConkey, who's available rounds later. So I'd rather have Ladd McConkey compared to a Jaden Reed, and his ADP is 80.6 compared to 67, a full round and then some after Jaden Reed goes off the board. So don't bother with him. For the Jaden Reed pick, like I said, grab Alvin Kamara, grab Rashee Rice, grab a player. More Aaron Jones is available there. I'm looking to fill other positions. When Jaden Reed is there, it's just too crowded. And again, teams cannot support. There's never been a time that I can recall, and you guys let me know, where a team has supported three high, drafted as starters in your fantasy football league, wide receivers in the same wide receiver room. I don't recall it ever happening. We've seen the last couple of years that Seattle's group with Metcalf, Lockett, and now Jackson Smith-Njigba has a hard time producing consistent points for any one of the three guys. It's another trio that I generally avoid, especially in regular season long, not in best ball formats. But the nice thing about the Seattle group is at least, Lockett and JSN are, they're in the 8th, 9th, 10th round. When you're talking about drafting these guys as starters for your team, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. Let's shift gears now and talk about a running back that I am avoiding this year. So I'm looking at Cincinnati supposedly starting running back Zach Moss as a significant avoid here in my best ball leagues for a couple reasons. Let's start with the main reason. Zach Moss, kind of an unexciting player, much more of a bruiser back in his time in Buffalo, a guy who can get in there and put him in, get you a couple yards, maybe grind it out for the first down. He was fine last year, quite honestly, in Indianapolis with the Colts. The issue with Moss is, first of all, he's on a Bengals team that has not produced well to the running back position over the past few years. And you may or may not think that's important. I do think that's important. Teams that produce well to the running back position one year, they do it the next year. It's certain offenses are designed a certain way that produce well. And if you look at Joe Mixon's history with the Bengals, it's very sketchy. Yes, there are some massive pop games, but a lot of disappointing games. But that's not the main reason. So obviously that's unfortunate. And I don't think Zach Moss is going to be getting a ton of passing game work. But the main issue is the potential rise of Chase Brown, the RB2 currently for the Bengals. Chase Brown looks like an exciting, dynamic player, and he certainly has the potential to surpass Zach Moss and become the sort of primary back. I don't think either guy fully replaced the other guy, but the whole situation feels very much like a 50-50, 60-40 kind of split. None of it is going to produce very well. So for me, when I get to that part of the draft where Zach Moss is going, I'd rather just take someone like Jaylen Warren, who again produced pretty well last year considering his role, and now his team looks to be sort of hyped up for that run game. Najee Harris, has never looked all that great. So if I need a backup running back, be more like a Jaylen Warren. I don't mind the rookie, Jonathan Brooks, who I can get a full round later. Probably won't be ready for the start of the season, but if I'm taking a guy like this late in the draft, he's really mostly for late season run. And then keeping it on the rookie tip, Trey Benson has the upside, and let me just sort him out here on this list, but Trey Benson, who is available 30 to 40 picks after Zach Moss. So 4 or 5 rounds later. Yes, he's backing up James Conner. Well, grab James Conner and grab Trey Benson both. James Conner has been spectacular as a scoring running back with the Cardinals, but he's also got a significant injury history. Benson is by all measures an elite rookie that will demand touches, and he'll get the starting nod, I think, sooner than later. I think a banged up Conner comes in, gets hurt, Benson takes over the job. This is how you win your best ball league. So Trey Benson is somebody I'd much rather be targeting compared to Zach Moss or even James Conner for that matter. Finally, in terms of a quote unquote player that I'm avoiding, I'm going to talk about the QB position in general. And I'm generally avoiding the top 5 QBs, but the main one that I'm looking to avoid is Lamar Jackson. And this is just one of those situations I don't really understand. I don't understand why Lamar Jackson would rise up to QB 3 or 4 overall. He's never produced fantasy points that are consistent enough to sort of want to spend an early premium pick on him. But the main reason for me is there are just players who are just as good and should produce equal to better production multiple rounds later. I'll show you right now. Even if we take the leveled up scoring that Lamar Jackson put up in 2023, where he averaged 23.1 fantasy points per game, and that was a great season for him. We're not going to take that away. Had some monster games, especially late. He didn't have Derrick Henry on the team smashing his way into the end zone. At that, Lamar Jackson had to do a lot of the scoring for the Ravens in 2023. He's not doing that in 2024. You got Derrick Henry over there. Not to mention, there are other wide receivers, or there are other quarterbacks available who are really, really good that you can get multiple rounds later. For example, Dak Prescott had the same or just about the same exact fantasy production per game as Lamar Jackson did, has a lower injury potential compared to Lamar, who's running a little bit more, but not, he runs more for sure, but Dak is mobile as well. But most importantly, yeah, again, Dak is available pick 77, where you have to take Lamar at pick 45. So that is a world of difference. I've mentioned two other names at quarterback that you could just get that should be just as good as Lamar this year. That's Anthony Richardson, who also smashed last year. Forget this fantasy points per game. In the games where he was healthy, there were only really two of them, 30 points and 22 points. So Richardson was crushing it. I think he got hurt midway through this game where he'd already scored 17 by halftime. So he is going to be a fantasy beast in 2024 if he can stay healthy. And you can get him 2 rounds after Lamar Jackson. And he's much easier to stack because Josh Downs and Adonai Mitchell and all those guys are available really, really late in your best ball draft. So Anthony Richardson, Dak Prescott. And then when I really, really want to wait on QB, I could just take Jaden Daniels, who profiles as an elite rushing quarterback. So those are your 5 players with some extras that I'm fully avoiding and have not drafted at all over the course of my 40 plus best ball drafts so far this year. Let me know who you're avoiding. Are there any players you guys hate? Do you think I'm crazy? Did I pull some players out that you love? Tell me why in the comment section below, and good luck this year. We're going to keep this fantasy content going, help you crush your leagues in 2024. Take care, everybody.